Welcome to 101 East. I'm Steve Chow. In Malaysia, freedom of speech is under the microscope. Dozens of opposition politicians, academics, journalists, students, even a cartoonist have been arrested under a controversial sedition law.
Tak boleh mencabar hak istimewa Melayu.
Critics say it's a government attempt to silence its opponents and stifle dissent as its popularity wanes. Marianne Jolly meets those facing jail for speaking out and investigates the future of free speech in Malaysia.
Downtown Kuala Lumpur, thousands take to the streets to protest against Prime Minister Najib Razak's government and its policies. Chanting for reform, the march comes in the aftermath of a swathe of arrests for sedition.
Most of the leaders here, whether Mat Sabu, myself, Khalid Samad, are all victims, soon to be charged, already charged.
Parliamentarian and daughter of jailed opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim, Nurul Izzah Anwar was arrested in March.
And then people realize, so what? Sedition or not, these are just used to silence protesters, and they have to fight back.
The 1948 Sedition Act is a relic of British colonial rule during the communist insurgency and makes it a criminal offence to say or publish anything that has a tendency to incite hatred or contempt against any race or religion, the Malay royal families, and until recently, the government and the judiciary. Prime Minister Najib claims the law is vital to maintaining unity in this racially diverse country, but many believe it's being used for something much more sinister.
What we're seeing is we look down the list of people who have been brought up on Sedition Act charges in the last, say, 6 months. They're almost all opposition.
I think Najib and his government has chosen to go backwards to the Mahathirist era and years and just clamp down and to focus on the right-wing agenda, going back to race and religion, protecting Malay interests.
Unlike Nurul Izzah Anwar, they're high-profile and successful individuals. Internationally acclaimed political cartoonist Zunar. Lawyers for Liberties, Eric Paulson. And Indian rights campaigner and lawyer Udaya Kumar.
It's very draconian. The fact that Malaysia is seizing upon archaic colonial era legislation to clamp down on its critics says a lot about the mentality of the current government when it comes to human rights.
Nurul Izzah Anwar, or just Izzah as her family call her, has no intention of cowering in the wake of her recent arrest. A senior member of Malaysia's opposition party, today she's in the northwestern province of Penang to launch the opposition's campaign for a by-election. The seat was declared vacant after the imprisonment yet again of her father, Anwar Ibrahim.
Do you see what is happening? You kill Anwar's voice, and then there will be no end to the rakyat's misery.
For Izzah and her family, it's been a long fight against the coalition government, dominated by the United Malay National Organisation, or UMNO, that's been in power for almost 60 years.
If you don't speak out, there will never be an end under this corrupt regime. One thing that kept us alive: we shall never surrender to Najib and his authoritarian government.
Izzah was 18 when her father, then Deputy Prime Minister, fell victim to what is widely viewed as a politically motivated campaign to silence him.
The phone call I received on the day of his arrest, the day of his sacking, 2nd September 1998. He called me up and he says, Izzah, I've been wronged, we will fight this, we must not surrender. I think those words rang clearly until today.
Izzah saw her father brutally bashed by police when he was arrested.
It's very heartbreaking to see my dad getting hurt like that for nothing, and I just want justice to prevail.
In 1999, she was there as he was convicted for corruption and sentenced to 6 years in jail. And just a year later, she watched as he was found guilty of sodomy and sentenced to another 9 years in prison, a verdict that would be overturned in 2004.
It was a good lesson as I saw how our judiciary was made a mockery of, how the police force was so bent on whether it was arresting, in terms of high-handedness, in terms of its professionalism. And I also saw how the media was used to vilify Anwar Ibrahim, my father. And all these things really brought home the need to fight for our democratic institutions, because he was the number two man in the country.
Izzah was first elected to Parliament in 2008 and is Vice President of the multiracial People's Justice Party, the party Anwar Ibrahim led until his second conviction for sodomy in February this year. Soon after her father was sentenced to another 5 years in prison, Izzah stood up in Parliament and delivered a passionate condemnation of the judiciary.
Dalam tunduk akur kepada kehendak telunjuk tuan-tuan politik, hakim-hakim menjadi rakan jenayah pembunuhan kebebasan dan integriti badan kehakiman. Mereka menjual diri mereka kepada syaitan, memperdagangkan nurani mereka demi pulangan kebendaan, kedudukan dan jaminan jawatan.
Parliamentary immunity doesn't apply when it comes to the Sedition Act, though few members have ever been arrested for a speech, the last more than 30 years ago. But when a leader of a Malay supremacist organisation with close ties to the UMNO party lodged a complaint against Izzah, the police acted swiftly.
It was quite clear. They wanted to arrest me. Not really interested to take my statement, to see how seditious, how it could affect the security of Malaysia through a speech in Parliament. But really acting under orders and wanting me to be, spending the night in the lockup.
Did they explain to you why they needed to keep you there overnight?
Oh, they said this is, we have to follow orders. It's a sad state of affairs because you expect separation of powers, you expect these bodies, whether it's the police force or the Attorney General's chambers, to act independently and professionally to safeguard the rights and the safety of all Malaysians. But that's not being done, that's not being practiced in Malaysia.
78 people were investigated last year for sedition and a further 38 this year. For the rare breed of political cartoonists in Malaysia, it's rich fodder, and especially for the man who goes by the name Zunar. Celebrated for his work overseas, he recently spent 3 days in a police lockup.
What it's all about is about that I will keep drawing until my last drop of my ink. It doesn't matter how you do it to me. You can see that you can chain my hand, you chain my neck, you change my leg, but I still use mouse to draw, So if the government want to stop me, what they need to do is to stop the ink supply coming to Malaysia from airport or what.
You better not tell them that.
It's a secret.
They might take it away from you.
Like Nurul Izzah Anwar, it was Zunar's criticism of Anwar Ibrahim's conviction that made him a target. A series of tweets saw him arrested and then charged with 9 counts of sedition. Having raised the more than $6,000 bail with the help of his supporters, he's free for now, but if found guilty, he could face up to 43 years in jail.
I am more dangerous than a murderer. I am 50 years old. You expect me to spend until I'm 100? Let me show you some of my book.
Oh, excellent.
It's in my studio here.
Are these all banned books?
These are banned book.
And he may yet face further sedition charges. His book, The Conspiracy to Imprison Anwar Ibrahim, is currently under investigation.
The government feel this is very dangerous book. The main target for this book is for those who live in rural area, where they don't have access to an alternative information. So you can read and can understand that.
And you've got a script there.
Yeah, I got a script there. People are giving script, somebody giving a script to the judge.
Making jokes at the government's expense is clearly a dangerous business, but it hasn't deterred Zunar from taking on the big issues. The almost $11 billion debt incurred by the government's One Malaysia Development Company, or 1MDB, Prime Minister Najib's denied links to the murder of a Mongolian woman, Altan Tuya, and his favourite subject of all, the reported excesses of the Prime Minister's wife, Rosmar.
Actually, she's the Prime Minister. And there's always a ring here. See that? So I say thank you for her because she gave an idea. She's my inspiration.
Not surprisingly, this isn't the first time Zunar's come under fire. In 2010, he was charged with sedition, but acquitted. His office has been raided numerous times, his books banned, and his printers and booksellers threatened with having their licenses revoked.
In this book, I need to blacken the name of the printers.
All right, why is that?
To protect them. I also put a note here. If the government want to know who's the printer, they have to enter the scratch and win scheme. You need to scratch yourself to see who is the printer.
Has anybody ever launched a defamation case against you?
No, that's the point. For me, if you don't agree, if you think that my book are defamatory, just file a suit against me, civil suit. That's a fair process. I think for me that is fair. But don't use a criminal law like Sedition Act or the Penal Code against me, handcuff me and detain me, put me behind bar. This I don't agree.
The dazzling political advertisements on the ruling Malay Party's headquarters in Kuala Lumpur are a sharp contrast to the government's fading light in the polls. In 2013, Prime Minister Najib and his government celebrated their election win, but they won with less than 47% of the popular vote. Now under serious pressure from the opposition coalition, he's abandoned a key election promise.
Kerajaan telah membuat keputusan agar Akta Hasutan 1948 dimansuhkan dan digantikan dengan satu rang undang-undang yang dikenali sebagai Akta Keharmonian Nasional.
Rather than repealing the Sedition Act, the Malaysian government recently rushed amendments through Parliament to strengthen it and clamp down on the ever-expanding internet.
The changes to the Sedition Act will allow the censorship of internet sites that merely appear to be seditious, and those found to be circulating prohibited material will be barred from using any electronic devices. Those charged under the Sedition Act will now have their passports confiscated, and if convicted, fines no longer apply. They'll face mandatory jail sentences of between 3 and 20 years.
But there's perhaps one concession. According to the amendments, it's no longer seditious to criticise the government or judiciary.
I think it's good that they've actually recognized that those were problematic provisions of the law as being things that needed to be taken out of the Sedition Act. The problem is now they've put other things in. So they've put in, for instance, religion. And the other problem is that they haven't addressed other issues in the Sedition Act. For instance, inciting disaffection amongst different groups of Malaysians, which is very broad. It can be used for almost anything. That's not a full indication of reform. It seems to be more of an indication of trying to appease the international community rather than really getting to the bottom of a repressive law that needs to be taken off the books.
The addition of religion to the Sedition Act, combined with the law's inherent ambiguousness, doesn't bode well for Erik Paulsen. A lawyer with the NGO Lawyers for Liberty, he was charged earlier this year after he posted this tweet accusing the government's Islamic Development Department, known as JARCM, of promoting extremism through its Friday sermons.
In what way was that told to you to be seditious?
Well, apparently because I've insulted Islam. That's the definition that they've given against what I've said. But obviously I wasn't criticizing Islam. I was criticizing the JARCM, which is a government body.
Eric was raising a concern held by many in Malaysia about JARCM sermons.
We are talking about a captured audience of hundreds of thousands of Malay Muslims. It's actually quite normal for some of these sermons to say that a lot of ills in this country, it's all caused by a US Jewish Israeli propaganda. It's a very normal thing to happen. There are sermons that demonizes the Shias. They call them sodomites. They call them, they're out there to destroy the Sunnis and so forth.
The backlash to his tweets was overwhelming. He was demonized for days in the government-controlled Malay media before being arrested and held for 2 nights.
UMNO, the ruling Malaysian party, they have lost substantial votes from the non-Malays, the Chinese and the Indian votes. And I think there's a need for them to portray themselves as the sole defender of Islam, so that they can get the Malay Muslim votes.
For Eric Paulson, there's little comfort in the thought his sedition charges are politically driven.
Certainly, I mean, you know, losing your freedom is not it's not a good thing. I mean, I only spent 2 nights in lockup, but you know, I potentially could spend up to 3 years in jail over a single tweet.
Today, Nuraliza Anwar and her daughter are on the way to prison to visit her 68-year-old father, Anwar Ibrahim. She and her family get to see him for just 45 minutes every 3 weeks.
Sometimes I do feel like screaming. I mean, I do feel like I could give us a break after 17 years, you know? Yeah. You could, perhaps.
Explaining to her young daughter why she was also arrested and locked up seems bizarrely natural.
What, your friends ask you again? In the lockup?
Yeah.
And you didn't say anything? Okay, so you can tell them I was there because of the unfair and cruel law.
Cameras aren't allowed inside the prison, but the family will talk to Anwar over a phone line, several layers of glass separating them. Her father's plight makes Iza philosophical about her own.
At least it allowed me to see, this is a glimpse of what my father and many others have had to go through. You know, in the past 17 years, I've been lucky. This is my first time in the lockup. And yeah, so at least it allowed me to see what my father had to go through.
One man who knows all too well what it's like to spend time behind bars for sedition is another lawyer and Indian rights campaigner, Udaya Kumar.
It's basically torture. There were murderers in my cell. There were rapists. I mean, there were violent criminals. For 16 days, I was put in a dark room cell, which had dim light. You sleep on the floor. My reading materials were taken away from me. Writing materials were taken away from me. That was the biggest torture for me in prison. They just left me alone. So the title of my book is...
In 2012, he was sentenced to 2.5 years for sedition, but was released last October, 6 months early.
This is actually a toothbrush that they give us in prison. 5 of us have to, in a cell, use this toothbrush. Have to
5 of you have to share it.
Have to share this toothbrush. This is the letter.
Udaya's crime was writing a letter in 2007, ahead of a Commonwealth leaders gathering, to the then Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Gordon Brown.
The contents of the letter was the A to Z of the racial victimization of the Indians in Malaysia.
But it was his use of the term ethnic cleansing, albeit in inverted commas, that riled the government.
I wanted this problem solved. These were issues involving life and death, very basic necessities to the Indians being denied.
And nobody was listening?
Yeah, the government, the UMNO government in particular was not listening. So I had no regrets.
Serving time for sedition was not Udaya's first prison experience. In 2007, after leading an Indian demonstration, Udaya was detained under the notorious Internal Security Act. He spent 17 months in prison without charge or judicial review before he was finally freed in 2009.
They say I was a terrorist, despite me being a lawyer of 20 years standing. They said I'm a terrorist. But when I sued them, I sued the Attorney General, the Inspector General of Police, and the government of Malaysia. They did not choose to fight the case, and the court struck off the case, and we did not get a chance to prove our innocence.
Pressure from international human rights organisations saw the Internal Security Act, or ISA, abolished in 2012. But at short notice, Prime Minister Najib's government recently passed the Prevention of Terrorism Act, once again allowing detention without trial.
We thought that we had seen the end of detention without trial. You know, not only on the Sedition Act, but reintroducing and passing a law that is going to set out that people who are accused of being terrorists will be detained up to 2 years without trial, and that they have no right to judicial review. You know, this is back to the Stone Age for Malaysia when it comes to human rights.
Senior members of government and police refused our numerous requests to be interviewed, but we found one UMNO member of Parliament who agreed. Nur Jazlan is an advocate of the Sedition Act for reasons of social harmony, but even he has reservations about the recent crackdown.
My contention is the government needs to basically be very careful in the application of the Sedition Act. We must balance it out. We do not want to use it to basically target people and, with the intention of putting them in jail to shut them out.
Jazlan concedes that sedition charges can often backfire on the government.
A lot of the people who are detained under the Sedition Act have become very popular amongst the public, which also furthers their political standing and political capital. So you look at it from both sides. Who actually gains?
In Malaysia, I believe laughter is a part of protest. You know, if you can't beat them, laugh at them.
In a park in Kuala Lumpur, Zunar's organised a lunchtime gathering of his fans, and it seems the numbers are growing.
Last time maybe limited to those who really know me before the detention. Now I think after the detention, the publicity went out and people start to look for my cartoon.
So they've done you a favour?
In that way, yes. I did say thank you to Malaysian police.
Zunar relishes having an audience and revels in drawing the Prime Minister's wife.
Okay, and then the fingers. What should we have in the finger? Oh, ring. Huh?
And then it's on to matters closer to home.
All those here, politicians, cartoonists, were in prison. This is Sedition Act also about.
Zunar's spirit is indomitable and belies the seriousness of the charges and potential life sentence he faces.
I would like to stress that for me, talent is not a gift but a responsibility. We cannot be neutral. When you see the crisis like this, when you're facing a corrupt regime and repressive regime, there is no way to be neutral. This is the duty of a political cartoonist. If you need to face a prison, there's a price for it. Somebody has to do it. If you don't do, then you betray the future generation.
At Nurul Izzah Anwar's house, It's a month since she was arrested for sedition. Under her bail requirements, she was due to report to police today, but was given a moment's reprieve.
Do you feel relieved?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess I am. But you never know in Malaysia. I mean, just because the police don't expect to come to the police station doesn't mean they can't charge you.
With the threat of being charged with sedition at any time hanging over her head, like Zunar, Iza stands defiant.
I don't want to be separated from my two children. They're very young. They're 6 and of course the other one is 8. I don't want to be separated from them, but I think right now I don't want to waste time worrying. I mean, when you're under this regime, anything can happen. So it's best to just, do our bit, remain optimistic, have a good head on our shoulders. I think that's the sort of spirit that one has to emulate.